Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney were once good friends, until Jackson went behind McCartney's back and pulled the ultimate betrayal. Paul McCartney has made an indelible mark on music history with his genre-bending songs and flair for experimentation. But the life of a rock star is peppered with glorious highs and serious lows, and McCartney is no exception. On June 18, 1942, James and Mary McCartney welcomed their son, James Paul, into the world. McCartney's father, a trumpet player and pianist, delighted in the sound of music weaving through the household. Paul had a natural affinity for it, learning the piano by ear and joining a choir. Rock and roll shook up McCartney's life, and soon he wanted nothing more than a guitar. With this in mind, he promptly exchanged a trumpet his father had gifted him for an acoustic guitar, a 15-pound Framus Zenith. After reversing the order of his strings so that he could play it left-handed, he soon wrote his very first song, I Lost My Little Girl. In 1954, when he was 12, Paul met a very special person on the bus, George Harrison, and the two of them became fast friends. When he was 15, McCartney listened to John Lennon and his band, the Quarrymen, for the first time at a church social. Everything about their sound pulled him in, a mixture of rock and roll and skiffle. When the Quarrymen invited Paul to join their band as a rhythm guitarist, he made a momentous decision that changed his life forever. McCartney agreed to join Lennon's band, and the resulting creative bond changed the course of music history. Only a year earlier, McCartney had lost his mother to an embolism suffered during breast cancer surgery. When he met his new band, it was like finding a new family. Lennon's mother, Julia, was especially compassionate toward McCartney due to the loss of his mother, but only a year after the two boys met, a similar trauma befell Lennon. His mother died in a road accident. McCartney and Lennon now had more in common than ever before, a shared trauma that trickled into their songwriting. By 1960, McCartney's troupe had gone through numerous personnel changes. The lineup now included Harrison, as well as Stuart Sutcliffe and Pete Best, and after a few name changes, they had finally settled on the Beatles. With their new identity in hand, their manager had secured them a residency in the German city of Hamburg. When the Beatles moved to Hamburg, McCartney started writing letters to his girlfriend, Dorothy. But Hamburg had more than its share of earthly delights, and McCartney admitted to having many other relationships while he was away. It was here that he also first experimented with recreational drugs, when the entire band started using Preludin to give them stamina during long performances. In 1961, Sutcliffe left the group to attend university and died unexpectedly from a brain hemorrhage that same year. By 1962, Pete Best had been replaced by Ringo Starr, and the band wrote their first hit, Love Me Do. Hello, my name's Paul McCartney and I play bass guitar. Hello people there, I'm George Harrison and I play solo guitar. This is Ringo Starr and I play drums. And this is John Lennon and I play better guitar. By 1963, McCartney and Lennon had become a songwriting power duo. It wasn't long before their music crossed the ocean, gaining momentum in America, but nothing could prepare them for what came next. The four dapper musicians incited a devoted fandom, and the resulting hysteria became known as Beatlemania. McCartney quickly became a teen heartthrob. It sounds like you have sort of a crush on Paul McCartney. Yes, that's true. And Paul McCartney, if you are listening, Adrian from Brooklyn loves you with all her heart. I love all the Beatles, but Paul's my favorite. But while everybody wanted to date him, Paul was sorely unavailable. McCartney met Jane Asher in the spring of 1963. Prior to a Beatles concert at the Royal Albert Hall, a photographer asked the band to pose with the excited British actress. After being photographed leaving the Prince of Wales Theatre together, the couple's blossoming romance became public knowledge. They quickly became a high-profile commodity and were featured consistently in the press. Beyond the flash of the camera, McCartney was completely taken by his new girlfriend. To him, she was the real deal. As 1963 progressed and the Beatles met with unprecedented success, it became harder and harder for McCartney to live a normal life. Both he and Asher could no longer walk the streets or visit hotels without being surrounded by adoring fans or eager photographers. McCartney and Asher holed up in her parents' home in London, and he eventually moved into their attic, living with them for the next 3 years. His time spent there was varied and introspective. This residence was more than a refuge. It was the place where some of the greatest songs ever written had their origin stories. McCartney and Lennon wrote I Want to Hold Your Hand in an inspired frenzy. Paul wrote Yesterday Here Too, rolling out of bed and planking out the dreamed melody on his piano. Living in the heart of London with the Ashers opened up a whole new world to McCartney. He went to highbrow parties, meeting artists, musicians and intellectuals. More than anything, he wanted to steep himself in the culture and come out with inspired ideas. Ideas and experimentation that he could apply to the Beatles' music. But even with this healthy home life, McCartney and Asher still faced their fair share of romantic tension. McCartney constantly came up against Asher's desire for independence, especially in her career. She had a passion for acting and wanted to amount to more than a Beatles girlfriend. She was strong and opinionated, and even though this drove McCartney up the wall, he felt broken without her. Their relationship shifted in 1967 when Asher left on a 5-month acting tour. When she returned, everything had changed. While she was away, McCartney experimented with LSD for the first time. At first, he was unsure about hallucinogens, but he soon gave in to temptation and indulged in a second acid trip with Lennon after a day of recording. When Asher returned, she felt like an outsider. McCartney and Lennon had embarked on a drug-infused adventure that she played no part in. Jealous and excluded, she felt disconnected from the new McCartney, a man greatly affected by his spiritual highs. But their problems went even deeper than this disconnect. Throughout his relationship with Asher, McCartney still entertained the company of other women. Because he wasn't married, he didn't recognize this as a moral failing. He led the life of a rock star, falling prey to his ravenous groupies and pursuing affairs with American actresses such as Peggy Lipton. But he couldn't keep these betrayals quiet forever. The media consistently predicted McCartney and Asher's imminent marriage, and on Christmas Day 1967, they proved everyone right by announcing their engagement. But it wasn't long before the fairy tale came crashing down around them. When Asher returned home unannounced one day, she caught McCartney in bed with his American girlfriend, Francie Schwartz. Devastated, she turned around and walked out. By the summer of 1968, their 5-year relationship was over. During the 60s, the Beatles underwent a number of transformations. McCartney, increasingly fascinated by the avant-garde scene, brought experimentation and conceptual ideas to the table. But with two creative geniuses heading the band's direction, conflict was inevitable. While contention between McCartney and Lennon began early on during the production of Rubber Soul, the health of the entire band suffered as their fame rapidly grew. After their 1966 US tour, the Beatles stopped performing for good. But McCartney wasn't ready to give up. Paul was the real catalyst for the concept album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. He wanted to create a new persona for the band to inhabit. While the album enjoyed critical success and is still considered one of the best albums of all time, it truly marked the beginning of the end. Please do subscribe to our channel, Tales That Tell. On top of that, your support helps keep the channel going. Click the link in the description for more details. In 1967, the band received devastating news. Their manager and father figure, Brian Epstein, had died. McCartney quickly filled the leadership vacuum, but not everybody in the band was happy about it. According to Lennon, McCartney led the band in circles, and it wasn't long before everything started to fall apart. Paul met talented photographer Linda Eastman a number of times before officially asking her out. In 1967, their first introduction led to them sporadically meeting whenever they found themselves in each other's city. But at the time, McCartney was still with Jane Asher, and any possibility of a serious relationship seemed out of the question. Nevertheless, the two of them shared an undeniable spark. All they needed was the right timing. After McCartney and Asher broke off their engagement, Paul took a leap of faith and called Linda. He asked her to hop on a plane and join him in London. His instincts were right, and soon the two of them had fallen in love. The next month after finishing the White Album, he joined Eastman in New York, where he had the chance to bond with her 5-year-old daughter, Heather. This was a rare moment of peace for the harried musician. During this time, McCartney sported a beard that offered him a semblance of anonymity, especially in a city like New York. For once, he could walk around unrecognized and ride the subway without being mobbed by excited fans. By the end of the year, McCartney was positive that Eastman was his life partner, and while on a trip to Portugal popped the question. McCartney and Eastman married in the spring of 1969. It was a joyous and understated occasion, with the bride already 4 months pregnant. However, there seemed to be a glaring discrepancy with the guest list. None of the other Beatles were in attendance, but this was no mistake. In the autumn of the same year, McCartney became the subject of an urban legend that people still talk about, that Paul had actually died in a 1966 car crash and that the band had found a lookalike to replace him. This theory became widely known as Paul is Dead, and fans started looking for clues in the Beatles' lyrics and art that supported it. In order to appease his fans, McCartney had no choice but to respond. McCartney posed with his wife, his new baby Mary and adopted daughter Heather for the cover of Life magazine, thus proving to the world that the rumors were unfounded. The title of the cover read, "Paul is still with us." But while fans were assured that they still had Paul, nothing could prepare them for losing the Beatles. The band was at its wits' end, and with animosities too great to overcome, one member in particular pulled away from the pack. On April 10, 1970, McCartney announced that he was leaving the Beatles. The collapse of the band he had once called family sent him into a spiraling depression. While he languished in grief, his wife came to his aid and gave him all the encouragement he needed to pick himself up and try again. McCartney wrote a song for Linda, "Maybe I'm Amazed," to commemorate the strength she lent him during the Beatles' breakup. After debuting a successful solo album, he put together a new band called Wings. Although Linda was never known for her vocal abilities, McCartney made sure to include her in the lineup. It was nerve-wracking to launch a band in the wake of the Beatles' success, but in the end, McCartney had nothing to fear. Wings started out small and met with giant success. The next decade boasted accolades for McCartney and the band, but nearing the end of the Wings era, something terrible happened. Former Beatle John Lennon, who was 40, was shot and killed last night outside his luxury apartment in New York. When the reporters cornered McCartney outside a recording studio for his reaction to this earth-shattering news, they couldn't believe his response. Later on, he deeply regretted this response, boiling it down to the overwhelming shock of the situation. He just didn't know how to put it into words. In 1995, Linda McCartney found out she had breast cancer, and it was discovered too late. After the cancer spread, the doctors gave her only 18 months to live. From the late 70s, McCartney and Michael Jackson collaborated on a number of songs, but what seemed like a promising friendship quickly turned sour. In 1985, Jackson bought the publishing rights to the entire Beatles catalog, right out from under Paul McCartney. It was a diabolical move that had McCartney bowled over by its blatant betrayal. For Jackson, it was just business. Despite his anger, McCartney refused to speak negatively about Jackson. It wasn't until 2017 that Paul finally secured the rights to his own music. If you enjoyed this Tales That Tell video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.